Medical Man ArraySeven here, trying to tell you guys about this wonderful new little program called Discord that only a few people truly know about. It's a free chat room program that lets you talk to your friends, your teammates, and if you feel like putting up with my crap, even me. Download Discord through the link below and connect to my channel at discord.gg/ArraySeven. Hop in the discussions, swing by the chat rooms where I usually hang out, and submit fan art for the end title cards. Alright, that's done with. Let's get this show on the road! And at long last, after over 400 days of waiting when all hope seemed to be lost, the Pyro update has arrived in the form of the Jungle Inferno. And needless to say, it is quite the pack of content. We got everything from maps, contracts, weapons, rebalances, hell, even a short. And while I really enjoyed the update, what with the new things to do and play with, it is not without the traditional Valve, hiccups, for lack of a better term. So what exactly is new? Well, before the title card cuts me off, I'd like to mention that what Valve did differently this time is that, goddammit, we got 6 new maps added to the general pool for matchmaking. Well, new is a relative term. I've been playing on and hating the guts out of Brazil for years, and I know that some of these other maps are old news as well. The problem here is, the maps are a total mess. Mercenary Park is a stew of confused players, random crits, and 90% choke points that make rounds either last forever or end immediately. Enclosure makes me feel incredibly claustrophobic, and I guess that was the intent, but even so, for a payload map, it plays a little bit too hectic for me. Especially as the medic main, I'm always in the crossfire, okay? If anything, if a random crit comes within 10 meters of me, I'm gonna get ended, I guarantee it. I'm more of a fan of the big open spaces like Upward and Badwater, but that's just me. Moss Rock is the one that I've actually enjoyed the most, mainly because I really like attack defend in general. It's a very differently designed map, and it's not easy to take a risk like that, so I can respect the unique design. But still, even though I enjoy it, it's not exactly optimal. There's no space in it whatsoever. I think it's just a running theme for all these maps. There's no space in them. They're just tightly compact. That's all they are. Banana Bay is a total clusterfuck. I'd like to actually congratulate this map for confirming my suspicions that Payload Race officially spawns the worst maps possible. Arguably worse than Arena. The whole thing is Swiss cheese. There's bridges, holes, stairs, and rails everywhere, and there's no real way to tell where you are. It might as well be called Spaghetti Bay, because that's basically what it is. I enjoy Lazarus. Not enough to play it often, but as far as King of the Hill maps go, this one might be on par with Harvest. Kind of a place where you don't take anything seriously, and you just shitball for 10 minutes, and there's no problem with that whatsoever. And of course, bringing up the rear is Brazil. For those of you who play competitive TF2, you might recognize it. It's made a couple rounds in the rotation, and while a lot of people aren't huge fans of it, it certainly plays way better than the rest. Now, of course, it's not quite designed for 24 to 32 people, but it's a start. It plays okay, and that's fine. Now, while these maps certainly aren't much to write home about gameplay-wise, they do wonders for TF2's aesthetics. The game has suffered from this nasty, dusty orange and faded blue color scheme for ages, and seeing really bright colors of tropic water and jungles and lush landscapes, it's such a nice break from the regular, dusty, dirty, gritty look. I hope this level of detail becomes more commonplace in some of the newer maps built for casual. I wouldn't recommend this level of detail for a competitive map for, obvious reasons, but having a good looking environment to play in for the layman can definitely make a huge difference. Like me, I like playing on pretty maps, so go figure. It seems to me the developers of all these maps put a little bit more time in fashion than function, which I myself have been guilty of, but the problem is that after all that time and effort put into decoration, aesthetics, putting all the design elements into it, and all the detail, like making Mercenary Park actually look like a Chinese Jurassic Park knockoff, it's all gonna go to waste when the initial attraction wears off, and nobody wants to play it because the map it's a mess, it's a tragedy. Same with the other 3, and Brazil, while not being one of the prettiest maps, at least plays fine. I feel like the maps they added already have a shelf life of maybe 2 or 3 months maximum or so before people stop playing them and go back to the typical Badwater, Upward, and Gorge map preferences, even after all the passion that went into designing them, and it's actually quite a tragedy. The contractor is just cool. Doesn't do a damn thing different, mind you, just a fancier way of showing contracts and making so instead of having to give out contracts, you just work your way through them, and I really like that. It's just cool, it's just fancy, I like it. It's cool. It's slowly bringing TF2 to the 21st century. And, gameplay-wise, not necessarily canonically. I really wish they kept the contracts implemented since they were first introduced. I have no idea why they keep making these resurgences every couple months. It encourages people to try new classes and weapons and rewards people for playing the game, and it teaches newer players the ropes. Well, at least better than the training mode. I don't understand why they aren't a more common thing. I really don't. They just seem to work well, and they seem to be easy enough to implement. I just don't understand why they aren't a more common thing. I mean, they seem to be easy enough to implement, and you could tailor the rewards to drop weapons for newer players to use. The only problem I've come across is just now during the Pyro update when the contracts that require classes less equipped to deal with the current never-ending onslaught of Pyros are incredibly difficult. To be fair, this should be fixed once the hype dies down and people go back to regular TF2. We got 5 new weapons to play with, and while that might not sound like a lot, it has definitely rocked the boat for the meta, which will take some time to taper out again, and that's good. It's always good to mix things up. The Dragon's Breath, Rage, Fury, whatever it's called, that name is just boring. It's a really fun weapon. It offers a hugely different playstyle than your traditional WM1 Pyro, which is something that he really needed. And people seem to be complaining about it being overpowered. And I ask them why, and I'm always met with the same, it's too strong, it can almost two-shot light classes, or it makes Pyro more difficult to fight. Ugh, look, I'm not saying the weapon is perfect, but it's close enough to being pretty balanced, from what I've seen so far anyway. People seem to be getting upset that I can deal with light classes in a couple puffs, and they really need to take a step back and look at some of the other weapons TF2 has that nobody has a problem with, even though they can do the exact same thing. And the only reason Pyro is hard to fight right now is because there's so many of them. I guarantee you it isn't going to be any harder in the future. Pyro is just as counterable as any other class, even now. The thermal thruster is, without a doubt, every Pyro main's wet dream. Up until now, the only way a Pyro could get around is by either flare jumping or using the power jack on himself like a 14-year-old left at home. Finally, he has a serious increase in mobility that lets him spar with a soldier on high ground. Plus, it's a jetpack. Come on, who doesn't love jetpacks? They're the way of the future, y'all. I'm really looking forward to seeing this weapon more common because Pyro secondaries really haven't offered a lot of varied gameplay in the past, and having something that has the potential to completely change how they fight is super exciting. I'm super hyped for that. I would really love to see what the community manages to do with something like this, because what Valve has in mind for one weapon is by no means what the community is going to use it for. Look at sentry jumping and trimping. I just want to see if the community has some sort of way to take advantage of this. I'm really looking forward to that. Speaking of Pyro secondaries, the Gas Passer is a good idea, but is horribly flawed. It's designed to be a lingering Girardi sort of thing that can keep people walking somewhere for fear of being lit on fire. A sort of short-term area denial, and that's a great idea. But once you use it, you have to wait for it to recharge, and just bear with me, this might take a bit. Hang on, we're getting there. Anytime now. Apparently, you can speed up the recharge rate by doing damage, but even so, it doesn't help much at all. And I get why it takes so long. Being able to spam this thing makes everyone a walking matchbox, which is a good foresight, but you're giving up a secondary weapon, and doing that pretty much limits the Pyro's effective range to a Kmart walkie-talkie level. Not being able to replenish it from the resupply locker is a smart idea, but it seems to me that this weapon should have more of a Sandman-style functionality, with it being a melee weapon you could charge by doing damage, buff banner style or something like that. The slap attack is a fun weapon, kind of the cross between the Holy Mackerel and the Eviction Notice. It doesn't have much practical use, but the way I see it, Pyro could use a nice meme weapon, Plus, bitch slapping people is super satisfying. The second banana seems to be an okay weapon, pretty much on par with the other lunches, and I suppose it's more up to personal preference, especially since now we pretty much have the spectrum of food. It would have been even better if after eating it you drop a banana peel behind you that sends enemies slipping on it a little bit, kind of like they do in Manhattan. Team Fortress 2 got new skins in the form of war paint, which is cool, I guess. It's pretty nice to be able to pick and choose what weapon you want it for, though, because the best part of these is the skins themselves. I mean, they look fantastic, and like just having it limited to only one weapon at a time, it's just a waste, you know? Ask anyone who has the entire plaid set. It benefits to be able to pick and choose the weapons that you want it on. I've never seen sexier skins before. They look great. They look fantastic. I mean, they're flashy. They've got personality to them. They're a little edgy sometimes, but they're awesome. The biggest problem here, though, is that while these skins look good, the strange versions of them are pretty rare and expensive, and yeah, I'm sure you did that on purpose, Valve, but I really wish there was a way to make them strange. I've been so spoiled by stat clocks in TF2, I almost refuse to use a weapon unless it's tracking my kills. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I really wish there were fabricators that we could find that would make stat clocks for weapons beyond civilian grade. Maybe make them like the kill streak fabricators or chemistry kits, where you need a certain amount of different ingredients, just some way that a skin will not always be in its non-strange form. I suppose that's just me being a picky little snot-nosed brat, but I kinda wish there's a way you could work your way up to something better instead of just constantly rolling the dice. I mean, I have a lot of robot parts that I guarantee you I'm almost never going to use. It'd be nice to have a new use for them. Weapon inspections are probably my favorite part about this update. It seems a little benign, I know, but it gets me a little too psyched to be able to inspect every weapon I have. I know, kind of a little thing to be so worked up about, but I seriously enjoy it. Some of my favorite animations include the Delocos bar, the gunslinger, the self-aware beauty mark where it looks like the sniper's taking a sip. It's really cool to be able to see an Australian from every angle, or any sort of gun that you have a skin for it in every angle. You just couldn't always do that, and I'm just glad it's here. And so we come to the rebalanced weapons. Now there's a lot to talk about with these, so I'll keep it brief and save the in-depth stuff for another time. But there were 3 weapons I felt didn't really need to be rebalanced, those being the Gloves of Running Urgently, the Eviction Notice, and the Cow Mangler. Granted, the Cow Mangler did in fact get a buff, but the Eviction Notice especially was a pretty okay weapon, I mean, at least for me. Personally, I didn't have much of a problem with the way the GRUs worked, but I know a lot of other people did, and if smarter folks deem it worthy, then so be it. Pretty much everything else on the list desperately needed some reworked mechanics. It actually struck me as a little odd that almost all of these weapons I use on a regular basis. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol, the Eviction Notice, the YER. Does that make me a hipster? Does that make me a hipster? No? Yes? Okay. Anyway, the big thing I will definitely focus on in the future is the fixed Vitasaw, which is something I'm really looking forward to talking about. I don't have much else to say other than the fact that most of the changes were justified. I mean, they kinda already spoiled it for us a few months back, so it might as well be old news. The tweaks they did to the pyro are great, especially since the flame particles are just absolutely gorgeous. I really love them. Granted, it doesn't make every map look like the fiery pits of hell, but I mean, I digress. The air blast changes seem to be a little bit on the strong side, so I would really think that needs some work. Pyro's kind of been in a tragic state of disrepair, especially with it when it came to his weapons, because he's limited to such a certain thing, and every other class has had adaptations to help them overcome the things that, you know, they lack in, and Pyro really doesn't have that. I'm glad that they gave the Pyro some attention. The update, as predicted, is not without its issues. Day 1, the servers decided to shoot themselves in the face, as everyone anticipated, and there have been a number of exploits found. The most popular one seems to be the Infinite Health Heavy, thanks Delphi, you douche, along with a couple of broken map spots, all of which seems to have been fixed. Unfortunately, some of the glaring matchmaking issues are still present, and competitive mode is, and most likely will always be, a wasteland. The most controversial part of this update was how long it took to be released, leading to the all-important question: was it worth the wait? In my opinion, yes, but with a big but. I do think the update was worth the wait, but do I think it could have been released much, much sooner if the right people gave a damn? Absolutely. But the way I see it, TF2 had been starved for content for a very, very long time, and probably by the time summer of 2017 came around, still with nothing definitive, people just sort of stopped holding their breath, either because they gave up or anyone who still was suffocated. By the time the update that many thought would never come finally hit, it was phenomenal. TF2 saw some of its old numbers come back, which was excellent to see again. Did this update give us 460 days worth of content? No, not even close. In fact, there were some other updates that had just as much added in half the time. But I was so goddamn thrilled to know that this game had not yet been abandoned, and that feeling alone made things so much better. If you spend enough time in the desert, a cheesy water park will look like the greatest thing ever.
I'm the invincible, undefeated champion. Mount Zion's my ancestors can't rely on. Star of David, nah, the thought of stardom. Martyrdom and done crumbs left to the dumb thumb. To this play button, glutton of words, mud